Oh, almost forgot to turn on the light for today's show, but we're in there because I need to turn the light on in my brain before today's show. Hi, everybody. Hello. Good Tuesday to you all. A fine Tuesday morning. I'm Dan Vespers. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. We're winding it down here, friends. It's April. It's happy Jeremy Grant month, everybody. We don't have that much to do today. And this is going to become, unfortunately, a little bit of a routine at this time of year because season's almost over. But good news for you guys is I'm not going anywhere. We will be here all through the off season as well. Let me give you my ads from Monday, and a couple of them are really holds that I wanted to talk about. But I haven't been doing a holds category onto these shows because there really aren't that many guys that you should stick with for more than a game or two with 2 weeks left. I mean, if they're not performing, obviously. Let's dive straight in, though. Make sure to hit that subscribe button just in case you haven't already. This is the time of year where we're actually just doing shows. From a growth standpoint, we're basically doing shows to make sure that we don't lose any subscribers. But from a reality standpoint, we're doing shows for you maniacs that are running it to the end of the regular season or my Roto Games Cap friends, because you guys go to the end of the regular season and it's not that big of a deal. You pick up these weirdos that we're finding on the waiver wire and they're fun. You get to deploy them. It's actually kind of enjoyable. It's fun right now to be able to say, hey, my ad, one of my top ads yesterday is Keon Ellis, who we've been back and forth on forever. But it seems like, at least for the moment, and I don't know how the rest of this season's going to shake out because the Kings lost again, he has that starting job. And Malik Monk hasn't taken it back yet. But it also doesn't feel like it's solved the Kings' problems. They've lost their last 2. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They're a game up on the hapless Suns for the last play-in spot. And so the Kings are grasping at things right now. And it's not exactly working. Starting unit got beat. Pacers beat them with sort of like a weird combo unit. It wasn't the starters versus the starters. That was pretty even, actually, in yesterday's Kings-Pacers game. In any event, for Ellis, 27 minutes as the starter. I know it's not what you'd call full starters minutes because DeMar played 42, and so there just wasn't a whole lot to share if you were looking at kind of like, I guess, other guard spots. And Zach LaVine played 38, and then you're not going to size him up to Keegan Murray's size. Malik Monk played 28.5 off the bench. He's a hold for now. Shot the ball terribly here, had 5 turnovers. But, I mean, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. If he actually hits, I don't even, like 4, 5 of his shots even, then you're talking about actually a pretty good fantasy ball game. So hold on to Malik Monk, but with 27 minutes, Keon Ellis is a start. Basically, if he's a starting lineup guy, he's a start. We'll keep it simple. Kyle Filipowski is the next name on my ads board, and we talked about him a bunch on yesterday's show, but it bears repeating because we knew that Walker Kessler was not going to be in for this ball game. There was no chance that Utah was going to accidentally risk beating Charlotte. Jazz have come this far. They're going to see it to the conclusion. You might see Kessler back for the next 2 or 3 ball games, though, and then they probably just pull the plug on him at some point here with just 6 games left. We know Filipowski is going to be good anytime that Walker Kessler's out. He was actually pretty good. Filipowski was in the last game, even with Kessler in, the one prior to this Charlotte contest. But the key, of course, is that if we want to guarantee that Filipowski is going to have a good fantasy line, he needs center minutes, which he's not going to get that many of when Kessler's in there. So still, I think if you're in a games cap spot, which I think most of you guys that are still listening to this show, you probably are, your best play there is to continue to only use Filipowski when Walker Kessler's on the shelf. Yes, you could stretch it beyond that, but it's a little bit of it's a saucy play. Saucy. I probably wouldn't do it. Al Horford, Big Al, is back on the board here, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't expect this to happen. Some of it has to do with Jaylen Brown still being out, so it is opening up a little bit more in the front court. But Horford, and I think some of it is just like end of the season. He can kind of get the engines going a little bit, but he's been very good of late. He's been wildly over-rostered. Although there was that stretch when Porzingis was out, so Horford did deserve to be rostered during that. Yeah, he misses a bunch of ball games. They're going to give him half of every back-to-back off. They're probably going to give him other stuff off as well because the Celtics are locked into the 2 seed out east. But over the last month, Horford is averaging 14, 8, and 4 with a steal, a block, and 2 3-pointers. That's good enough for third-round value. That's over a month. Impossible player to have in head-to-head leagues because, he's missed 2 of his last 4. He's missed 3 of his last 7. Like, there's way too many games that he just gets off. Even if they're not back-to-backs, he's going to get some off and mixed in there. Like, he missed the game on the 29th because they said toe. I don't know. Got a toe. I got a few also. But boy, for games cap, he's coasting right now. And before we get to some of the, I don't know, maybe the more interesting names on this one, let's do a brief foray into the world of promo. And join us as we visit our friends at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for sports betting in 2025. The Final Four is upon us, and Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, and live in-game betting while the games are being played. That's what live means. The game is happening, and you can get in on action as the game happens. The lines are bouncing around as teams go on runs. BetOnline has the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to baseball, hockey, UFC, even the Kentucky Derby and NFL season futures are ready for you to get down on. And in between games, head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a full live casino to hang out with. BetOnline, the game starts here. Matas Buzelis finally made the board. Okay, not finally. He's been on the very close list for the better part of, well, really since the Laker game. We talked about this yesterday also. He's firing it up here. There was no Kevin Huerter for the Bulls yesterday, but you're seeing a big usage shift for him. And it really seems to have coincided with the Laker game. When he took 18 shots, he made 12 of them. The confidence is soaring for Buzelis right now. Only 7 shots in the game after that, but he still had a couple of blocks. Then 10 shots, 17 shots, 12 shots. It's that double-digit shot number that's been the big shift for him. And that's kind of been the story since he started getting talked about, when he's taken double-digit shots. And I'm not talking about creeping in there with 10. I'm talking about 12. I'm talking about 14, 17, bouncing around between 10 and 17 instead of between like 8 and 11. That's when he's worth looking at. He is likely to cool off at some point, but the question we need to be asking ourselves is, do we know for a fact it's going to happen over the next 2 weeks? We do not. But here's the other thing. Over the last month, he's still number 100 in 11 shots per game, which feels like kind of a repeatable marker, because over that stretch, he's shooting 46% from the field, 93% at the free throw line, 2 threes, 14, 5, and about 2 assists, a little under 2 assists, half a steal and 1 block. Over the last 14 days, the field goal percent has jumped up to 48. Free throw has stayed very, very good. Everything else is maintained almost exactly the same. And he's jumped from number 100 to about number 70. And yes, some of that is sort of like, it's a limited sample size, so it's hard to know where guys. If you extrapolated 15, 4, and almost 2 with a block and 2.5 3-pointers over the whole year at 48% from the field and close to 90 at the free throw line, that is a top 100 guy pretty easily. He's been, I would argue, pretty heavily over-rostered since the trade deadline because he was not very good up until about a week and a half ago for that Laker game in Los Angeles. But he's still on waiver wires. His rostership's gone up 17% over the last day and a half on Yahoo, from taking him from basically like a medium afterthought to a guy that's mostly on teams. And I think he probably should be, unless the usage runs out. So just keep a close watch on that. See what happens. Does it sort of tick back down at some point? Maybe. And if it does, you can move on because who the hell cares at this point of the year? Najee Marshall and Spencer Dinwiddie, I put in the ads board, but they're really more holds than ads. I mostly wanted to just stress the fact that, yes, Daniel Gafford came back, and PJ Washington's in there, and Anthony Davis is now the starting power forward, so they're sort of the jumbo package. But that's not a reason to abandon ship completely on Najee Marshall or Dinwiddie. Spencer still played 31 minutes. You guys know I'm not super high on his 9-category game, but if you're hunting, basically, if you're a team that's had him on a roster, you're probably a team that's been hunting points, assists. That's been a big one for him. And you don't care that much about field goal percent. That's not going to change all that much. Usage probably ticks down a little as different guys get back into the fold. But again, adding Gafford is not going to change Spencer Dinwiddie's usage all that much. Marshall, only 7 shots. That's something to keep an eye on, but he played 27 minutes. He had 8 boards, 3 assists, a steal. Again, the only thing we didn't really like there is the fact that he wasn't getting a ton of shots up. Klay Thompson took way too many shots, given the fact that, sorry, Mavs fans, Klay's not good anymore, and you guys probably figured that out over the course of this year. Oof. Every other team dodging a huge bullet on that one. I don't know why teams offered him the money that they offered him when it was like, I don't know. Am I insane? I feel like all of you guys watching, listening to the show saw the same thing I did the last couple of years, which is a guy that had 2 catastrophic leg injuries and then has been a pretty obvious downward trajectory since then. They think it was just going to magically turn around? Strange. I still think the Mavs are going to be kind of a scary team if they get Lively back. They're just going to be huge and hard to score on, but you could see in this one what happens when the offense isn't really there. Yee. So anyway, hold on to Marshall, I think, in most formats. Dinwiddie, hold on if you're attacking the categories where he's statistically relevant. And Klay Thompson, if you need 3-pointers, he's a stream there. PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, those guys are starts. Daniel Gafford does belong on rosters. He's the next name on our list here. He deserved his own row on today's show because he's back, and there are very few players in the NBA that can pile up fantasy stats as fast as Daniel Gafford can. 17 points, 7 boards, 2 assists in only 19 minutes of action yesterday. He is a heroic fantasy guy when he sees minutes, and this is him getting eased back in. He's been out for 2 months with an injury. That's a pretty damn long time, or about 2 months, month and a half, whatever, doesn't matter. It's been a long time. The minutes you will see tick up basically each game as the Mavs attempt to hold on to the 9 seed. I can't believe the fight for the 10. How the hell can none of these teams get those spots? Someone just win a couple of games. Mavs, Kings, Suns, anybody. Literally talking about any of you guys. Somebody win a couple of games and just lock in a play-in spot. Anyway, I figure Gafford's minutes probably hit 20 in the next one, maybe 21 or 22 if we get lucky. He probably caps out in the mid-20s. Once Lively's back, I don't think it even gets quite that high, but I don't know exactly how long until Derek's around. It sounds like he's relatively close, though. I'm not as bullish on picking up Lively, by the way, just for whatever that's worth. He doesn't roll up stats as quickly as Gafford does, and on a team this gigantic, there might not be enough for any of those dudes, but if you're like, hey, if I told you that Anthony Davis is going to play 30-something minutes and Gafford and Lively are going to each play in the 20s, you'd want Gafford because he gets fantasy stats quicker. Here's the very close board for today's show after the traditional podcasts take a commercial break. And I still have no idea if YouTube takes the commercial break also. Aaron Nesmith is back on the very close board. He had a couple of quieter ball games, but overall he's a player that it should be rostered really over the last month because he's been so good at percentages, and he's just continuing to run pretty hot. Even the downticks for him, it seems like they only last for 1, maybe 2 ball games, and then he kind of gets it revved up again. He didn't shoot all that great yesterday, but he made 9 out of 9 free throws, which, again, this is the thing. Over the last month, he's shooting 92% at the foul line. Not on a ton of them, about 1.5 free throws per game, but if you basically call him a guy who makes every foul shot, doesn't matter how many he takes. It's going to be useful. So Nesmith should not have been dropped after 1 quiet ball game. He's only 27% rostered in Yahoo leagues, which I get it. Not everybody needs a high percentages guy who gets you 2 3-pointers, 14, 15 points and a steal. But that plays in a lot of formats, and he's been good enough in those things where he should be on rosters right now. All right, in any event. Thomas Bryant is also on the list. This, of course, is tied to Miles Turner being out for yesterday's ball game. He was a game time call. Just missed it with an illness, which is, again, like these things are going around. Anybody that has had children, you deal with illnesses at the most insane rate of all. And then the next tier down is like a locker room because it's just a bunch of dudes or gals that are all mushed in together and then showering in close proximity so that you're like steaming, you're aerosolizing all of the germs. And so anybody that gets sick on a basketball team, they're just all going to get sick. And you hope that they can kind of fight it off without too much stuff. But he missed the ball game. That's obviously the long and short of it. They play again tomorrow, hosting Charlotte. If he's not 100%, there's no reason to rush him back there. So keep an eye on Thomas Bryant for a potential one-game fill-in. Pelle Larson is on my very close board because, honestly, I don't know whether I can trust him. He played 30 starters minutes. He's had 2 good games in a row filling in for Andrew Wiggins. But what do we really know about Pelle Larson? What do we truly know? We know that he's had 2 good fantasy games in a row. We know that he's had games earlier this season where he played 28-ish minutes. Not many of them, but a couple blended in if you look at the game log. And he didn't do a ton with those. He had a 37-minute game way back in November where he went for 14, 5, and 1. He had a 28-minute game against Washington where he had 16, 4, and 5. But again, everybody gets that against Washington. Against the Clippers a couple weeks ago, he played 28 minutes and had 10 points and 3 steals. So these last couple of games, they quite literally come out of nowhere with 29 combined points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, 5 steals, and 2 blocks. This just isn't what we've seen from him so far this year. So I get it. If you want to roll the dice, you could, but he's only making 2/3 of his free throws this year. He's 33% from downtown on the season, 44.5% from the field. Doesn't feel like a number you really want. He was only averaging 1.5 rebounds in 13 minutes a game. So even if you doubled that and then some, you still are looking at more like 4 to 5 instead of 7. The assists feels like it should have been more like 2 to 3, 2 to 4 instead of 4 or 5. I mean, the steals feel like that could have been real. 1 and some odd steals, but probably not 5 over every 2 games. So I'm just not sold. I'm not sold. I think we can do better. Tristan Vukcevic is on the list as well. Again, the Wizards are doing a little weird stuff right now. Alex Sarr is obviously the starting center. He played 31 minutes. Vukcevic played 22.5 in yesterday's ball game. Rashawn Holmes got 15 again. This was a simpler decision when Holmes was just getting DNPs, but now he's playing a little bit. Vukcevic only really needs about 24 minutes to be a top 100 guy. So we're close. And if you wanted to go down that path, I'm okay with it. But you're probably not going to get more than 5, maybe 6 rebounds on a good day. You're looking at a block. Maybe you hope for like 1.5 on a good day. And it does seem like he's not bashful. So at least there's that. Like you get him out there for 24-ish minutes, he's going to give you scoring in the teens. He's probably going to hit a 3-pointer blended in there. And so he does kind of have that easily translatable fantasy game where the field goal percent is decent because he's gigantic and some of his shots are going to be right in front of the rim, even if some are from 3-point land. But again, I kind of feel like we can just do better. Santi Aldama. I just rubbed the handle of my mug on the microphone. I heard the noise and I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And it was me rubbing a mug on a microphone. Strange decision, Dan. It's the end of the year. You got to cut me some slack at this point. Santi Aldama, who I'm, again, not sure that the Grizzlies really like him all that much, but he played well yesterday. And so he's a guy that we're tracking very closely, especially if anybody gets the back-to-back off for the Grizzlies. I don't think the Grizzlies are going to give people the game off. They're in real jeopardy right now. Memphis has just been kind of in free fall for like a month and a half. They're only 13 games over 500 now after a really quick start to the year. They lost their last 3 in a row. They've been pretty well passed by the Lakers, and now they're a half game up on the Warriors and only a game up on the Wolves and the Clippers. Like, the Grizzlies are at a real risk of falling into the play-in, and I don't know how they can afford to screw around at all. I don't really know what to make of Aldama. I think the answer is probably to just play him every day and try not to think about it too much. He's number 116 on the season. He's number 250 over the last month because the percentages have bottomed out kind of the way that we expected they would eventually. 235 over the last 2 weeks, 250 over the last week, and a lot of that is the percentages game. So truth is probably that he should be on rosters, but I haven't trusted him all year, and it kind of feels like it's finally coming to roost. Although, again, yesterday's ball game was a good one. Cason Wallace is close, and he had another good ball game yesterday off the bench with 10 points, 8 assists, 3 steals, and a block. And he's going to be a pretty reliable steals guy basically every single ball game. The issue for Wallace is if he's not starting, he's not going to be guaranteed 20-some-odd minutes. You might get, or at least not high 20s. You might get some 22s mixed in there, and that's kind of where this whole plan blows up. So more of a schedule play level guy, I think, if we're going to talk about how to use Cason Wallace. And the schedule is not all that impressive. They play every other day until a back-to-back Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. If somebody rests a ball game, I reserve the right to change my opinion there. Then he becomes kind of an injury replacement level dude. Now, he was great during the games that he was healthy when Jalen Williams was out, but then he missed a couple of games also, and that, again, kind of ruined it. And plus, a guy like Isaiah Joe blew up for 31 points yesterday, and so that's why it's hard to trust the other guys. I'm going to downgrade Rui Hachimura. I was maybe a little bit too bullish on him, but he played 31 minutes again and got 10 shots. My issue with Rui right now isn't that I don't think his role is going to be big, because I do. I think he's going to be a feature guy. You saw the Lakers run sort of the 5-out kind of offense for a lot of this game against the Rockets, because the Rockets are very good defensively, so Jackson Hayes just wasn't getting completely free rim runs. And Houston, well, Steven Adams is a really big dude, but he has no offensive game. Alperen Şengün is a strong dude, but not so strong that he could go through. The Lakers put LeBron on Şengün in yesterday's ball game. So there wasn't that guy. Houston doesn't have that guy that forces the Lakers to get Jackson Hayes back in there, because the rest of their team is not really a massive threat to go create and beat the defender, break down a defense. The Rockets are, pick and roll or Şengün out of the post kind of an offense. And the Lakers are a team that's going to switch everything. So that sort of, they had the right formula, basically. It's a bad matchup for Houston, is kind of what I'm saying. With the Lakers going with all of their sort of gigantic wings. When Hayes was in there, it was a much better matchup because the Rockets could get mismatches and then exploit them. But that's why I think Rui's just going to be in a lot. You saw a lot of Rui, Dorian, LeBron, Reeves, and Doncic lineups. I think that was the closing lineup yesterday. Jackson Hayes also played, or Gabe Vincent also played really, really well. But, his minutes are not going to get much higher than 23 like they were yesterday. So I think Rui's going to get more than 10 shots in most ball games. This is one where the Rockets kind of dared Gabe Vincent and Dorian Finney-Smith to beat him, and they did. And I think most of the time you're going to see Rui get, 10 to 12 shots, and that's going to usually translate to, 12 to 15 points for him. He just didn't shoot it all that well yesterday. The rebounds is what I got to see. Lakers split them up. Lakers had like 6 guys that all had 6 rebounds yesterday, but Rui wasn't one of them. So downgraded to very close. I thought he was, I think as the minutes continue to tick up into the low 30s, because he's sort of on a semi-restriction right now, I think he probably climbs inside the top 100, but it's definitely not a guarantee. Quick look at the watch list and my permission to drop name of the day. Watch list, A.J. Johnson. I don't know what the hell this dude's going to do the rest of the way. Sometimes we got to be honest with you out there. We do the best we can. He's played like 82 minutes in his last 2 ball games, I think. And he had 8 points in 37 minutes yesterday. It was a non-factor. Sure seems like he's playing enough to be relevant, but you got to have fantasy game. Bub Carrington is also on this list. He had 8, 8, and 9, kind of inching his way towards an almost triple-double. But we also know that his fantasy game is limited. Still, if he's going to play 38 minutes as the main point guard, I am getting ready to soften my stance against Carrington. I'm not there yet, but this game brought me a bit closer, mostly because it was like, here, give it to Jordan Poole and let him take a distant shot. But, Bub has big issues. The field goal percent is not good. The free throw has been rough. He's not a big steals guy. I wish he was. He had 3 in this ball game, but prior to that, he had basically had none for like a week. Doesn't score that much. Rebounds and assists are kind of what you're hunting for with him. And I think still for now, I'd rather call him a specialist, but he's not even really that. He's a schedule stream for a couple of categories. Bryce Sensabaugh makes the list as a watch list guy for the Utah Jazz. He had 19 points, 5 assists, 3 steals. He's going to score a bunch if the Jazz are going to pull the plug on everybody, but we haven't seen that that's necessarily going to be the case. Let's watch this one a little bit longer. KJ Simpson, we talked about. He's filling in for LaMelo Ball, who's out for the year. This is about as good as it's going to get. He had 10 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, a block, and a couple of 3-pointers on bad shooting numbers, but did it against a G League team. The Utah Jazz. Gaz. The Utah Gaz is who Charlotte played yesterday. Most games, and even good teams that are not taking the Hornets seriously, which is going to be everybody the rest of the way. Like Charlotte goes to Indiana, then they host the Kings, the Bulls. These teams still want to win. Memphis, Toronto's one where KJ might get a little bit loose. Then they'll have Boston twice at the end of the year. I doubt the Celtics are trying at all in those games. So maybe you get like 3 good ones out of KJ at the very, very end of the regular season. But between now and then, I'd be extremely nervous. Dorian Finney-Smith, we just talked about him a minute ago, but probably should have talked about him more. He played 32 bench minutes, 6 threes, 2 steals, and 3 blocks, and he's been running kind of hot lately. And you guys might remember that over the years we've had you guys remember last season we had the Finney-Smith race to 100 tracker? Because he has some fantasy game. Not a ton, some. And I think it was last year in Brooklyn where I was like, come on, Dorian, you can get to inside the top 100. You're not that far away. He never quite got there. The way he gets there is more like what he was doing in Brooklyn this year, which was 10.5 points. That's almost his career high. He had 11 in Dallas back in 2021. And he had 2.5 3-pointers, a steal, 0.6 blocks. He was up near 5 rebounds. That was pretty close to top 100 numbers with Brooklyn. With the Lakers, I mean, yeah, he had 6 threes in this game, but the blocks are not super consistent. The steals are pretty consistently like right on 1. The rebounds are pretty consistently like right around 4 or 5. There's just not enough there. Not every night. And like the problem with trying to deploy Finney-Smith or even calling him anything more than a watch list guy is it requires an assumption that everybody's going to defend the Lakers the same way, which teams haven't. Teams have different personnel, so they shouldn't. Houston has 2 or 3 defenders that they felt totally comfortable leaving on an island against LeBron and Luka and Reeves. Guys like Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., Dylan Brooks. Those guys going to hang. So what the Lakers did, in case you were watching this ball game yesterday, was they brought Şengün into pretty much every single action, or Steven Adams if he was the one out there, to try to get a big switched on to Luka, Reeves, or LeBron. And then those guys went around them, forcing the Rockets to help. And then who did the Rockets typically help off of, whether it was the 1 pass away or 2 passes away? The guys that were left open were basically Finney-Smith and Gabe Vincent. That's not the way it's going to be every day. There are a lot of teams that don't have the personnel to even force the Lakers into those kinds of actions. And so you'll see more Luka. Luka only took 16 shots yesterday. LeBron only took 12. Austin only took 11. Dorian Finney-Smith, 13. Gabe, 14. Rui, 10. Lakers had 6 players taking double-digit shots. Rockets, by the way, had 7 players take double-digit shots. It's not always going to be that way. So watch list on Finney-Smith. And then I offer you my permission to drop, and this one's sad because he was coming on in a nice way fantasy-wise. That's Kai Jones, who's been piling up fantasy stats anytime he could get to about 24, 25 minutes a game. He ain't going to get that high anymore. Gafford takes that job. Derek Lively takes what's left once he comes back. And so for now, Kai Jones getting 16 minutes is kind of a best-case scenario. You may drop Kai Jones unless the Mavs have a back-to-back coming up here at some point. Yeah, they got a Clippers road back-to-back on Friday and Saturday of this week. And so you might see Gafford and Anthony Davis perhaps alternate those games, and then maybe you get a couple out of Kai. So keep him on the radar for the back-to-back, but otherwise he is donezo. And that is our program. Have you guys ever washed a hat? This is not a promo, by the way. The way I said it, I know sounded like a promo. This is me actually legitimately asking you a question at the end of the podcast. Have you guys ever washed a baseball cap? I ask that because the one I'm wearing right now is this very beat up Brooklyn Dodgers hat that's, gone into the kind of old-timey, like low top hat. But it's not because of the way that it arrived. It's because it's just been beat up, and so it's floppy now. It's a floppy hat. Do you guys know that if you wash a hat and then, I don't even know if you dry a hat, what happens to the hat? Can you put a hat through a washer? I need your help. I'm crowdsourcing this at the end of the podcast. Season's almost over. I'm asking you guys hat maintenance questions at this point. Because you guys know I am balding. Not there yet. I still got a decent chunk of hair left, but it's running away. My dad used to call it the out-of-bounds marker. His forehead just kept moving farther back. I'd like to preserve these hats, but sometimes I wear them into sweaty or dirtier environs, and I want to spruce them up. Anyway, I'm Dan Vespers for Old Man Squad. Please hit that subscribe button on the way out, even if you don't like my hat discussion. Hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube, 5 stars, iTunes, and Spotify. And remember, we do shows all off season long, and there will be more folks with us here at Old Man Squad doing shows all off season long. Make sure to tune into my Twitter feed at Dan Vespers because we are about to break news on a big edition here at Old Man Squad. Just one show today. We're peeling it back for my mental well-being. I'll see you guys tomorrow.